silly is that?
Pulls off three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
Hello, welcome back to the Hoop Junkie podcast, the number one sports podcast in the world.
According to us.
I'm your host, Zach, and I'm joined as always by my trade deadline guru, Twitter twitching man himself, Chance Baker. How you doing, Chance?
Man, it's been a fun day. I'm doing great. I was up till probably, I think around 2 a.m. last night. I finally decided it was time to go to bed and wake up to see what else happened. But once the news got going, it's hard to stop.
Man, well, like last night was one of those things, and we'll get into it, I'm sure. But it was one of those things where, like, soon as I was like, okay, it's time to go to bed. I think we're done here. And then the biggest news of the whole trade deadline comes across my phone.
One of the biggest trades in history just randomly comes across. And so, yeah, hard to go to bed after that one.
Man, it's crazy. But look, Chance, hey, before we get into everything that happened today, we've got to talk about what happened earlier this week at Crypto.com Arena when LeBron James passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the NBA's all-time leading scorer in NBA history. What was some of your takeaways from that big night?
Honestly, man, it's just one of those records that you thought was never going to be broken. And I mean, 38,000 points when you really sit down, because I've been doing a lot of crunching numbers lately as far as who in the NBA now could have a chance at this. And man, it is really hard. Even if you look at some, guys that came in the league really young, like Luka, Jason Tatum, the fact that he's been able to stay healthy for this long and have such a long career, you basically have to score close to 30 points a game for nearly 20 seasons. And the fact that he was able to do that every single year, be so reliable, and was just crazy. I just love those moments when you're watching history happen and you're kind of watching it with Twitter and everybody's just collectively watching it together. Luckily, we had no more Twitter crashes. Shout out to Elon for keeping it going for at least 24 hours during all of this. But it was just amazing to watch it all together. Of course, he hits it with such an iconic shot. I'm sure you've seen the photo. I think I sent it to you. Where you got everybody in the background taking their pictures. Don't blame them for that. I would be too if I paid $15 million to get on those seats. But yeah, man, it's just absolutely incredible what he's done. Whether you love or hate LeBron, in general, I think anybody has to respect the accomplishments that he's had. And I mean, it's only going to go up. He seems like he's ready to play a few more years. So he's going to crack 40,000 and just make this record almost impossible to break in the future.
Well, and he said that too. He was like, man, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And the cool thing that I took away from that night, it really felt like a night all basketball fans just finally just came together, and it wasn't any you did hear a little bit of oh, he's still not the GOAT talk or whatever, but for the most part, everybody just enjoyed it and just took it in. It was just man,
right.
We might not see this again for another 40, 50, 60, 100, 200 years. We might not ever see this again in our lifetime. So I think that was the coolest thing was just seeing that whole situation. And too, and then going back and looking at LeBron's, how he came into the league, came in as the chosen one. And dude, he has lived up to that to every degree. How often do you hear about players with all this hype that comes into the league and then they actually live up to it, and you can't deny that LeBron has been the best player of this generation. You can't deny it.
Oh yeah, I think everybody would agree. And I mean, it's like I said, there's, LeBron is so polarizing. Anybody that, is at the level that he is going to be polarizing. People are going to love him. They're going to hate him. I'm one of those few that's kind of in between. I respect his greatness. I wouldn't call myself a huge LeBron fan. I think he has his annoyances, but they're just minor things that aren't make or break. It's I think he's just kind of corny with some things, the first page of books, just a lot of small things, lying about stuff. If that's the worst he's ever done after being in the spotlight since he was 16 years old, I think he's done pretty good. How many people get in the spotlight at that age and they're able to have zero major controversies, zero issues, PR related. he has been, a great role model for, young people everywhere. And, regardless of what you feel about him, if he annoys you, you think he's too cocky, you don't think he's the GOAT, you compare him to MJ, like all that's fine. But regardless of all that, you have to respect the legacy that he's built, and to be able to play at this level for going on 20 years now, like no one can deny that. And I've kind of gone back and forth as far as like the whole GOAT debate. Like I'm almost to a point where I think that the game is so different now. You almost just have to do GOATs like by eras, kind of like what you said.
Yeah.
And like, he's no question the best player of this generation. Like from the time that he entered the league until now, he's been the best player in the league. And I think regardless of, compare him to Kareem or, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, like regardless of who your overall GOAT is, he's been the unquestioned best player of this generation in every single way. And yeah, seeing him hit that shot and celebrate, like it was just a great moment for NBA fans all around to just celebrate and watch that happen live. It's something that we'll most likely like never see again, especially in our lifetime, unless they just completely change the rules and people are scoring 50 points a game in the future, which you never know the way things are going now. Like it might get to a point, but in our lifetime, I'd be shocked if that record is broken. And we witnessed history this week.
I'd be shocked too, man, because like the longevity piece in itself is just so impressive. Like because you're only going to hit that record if you're playing 20 years. and you're not pulling a Kawhi Leonard and taking a whole bunch of rest days. Like you got to play.
That's part of it too. So that night it happened, I was kind of doing the math, crunching some numbers, just because, you know me, I'm a numbers guy. So if you had to pick, because I think we'll have the same person, if you had to pick one person in the NBA that could realistically have a chance at tying the record, who would you pick?
Realistically, I'd probably pick Luka just because he came in the league young. And
okay, that's who I picked too. So I did the numbers on Luka. So Luka right now has 8,500 career points, which is quite a lot because he's on his 5th season, right? In the league. So he has 8,000. LeBron just broke the record with 38,000. So Luka needs 30,000 more points. So he would have to basically average 28 points per game and play 70 games per season, which is actually kind of a stretch in these day and age. Like most stars play like 55 to 60. He'd have to average 28 points a game, and that's basically 2,000 points a season. So he would have to do that for another 15 years. So at age 38, he'd have to still be averaging 28 points per game and still be playing 70 games a season just to have a chance.
That's crazy. And then and someone like Luka ain't playing that long.
Right. Yeah.
Like he wants to go back to Slovenia and drive his expensive cars. Like
you said, the longevity of it, like it's so unlikely because Luka has just started so young and has just been scoring at such a high pace. You would think that it'd be like, oh yeah, if Luka just keeps doing what he's doing, 10 or 12 years, like he could do it. No, he has to basically play at the exact same level in his mid-30s and never miss a full season to injury. Basically play at least 70 games a season. If he misses a full season, then all of a sudden that's even harder of a stretch. So it's so unlikely, man. I really don't think we're going to see it happen. It's an incredible feat that we witnessed this week.
But I do think with the way scoring has gone up, I expect us to see a lot of change in the numbers between 10 to 5. Like I could definitely see a lot of these young cats getting there just because you start thinking about how guys are just scoring 30 every night.
For sure.
With scoring averages. I remember it was a big deal when T-Mac and Kobe, those years where they were the scoring champs at 30 points. But now we've got to win the scoring champ crown, you got to be over 33 points probably to end the season now. So
yeah, it's like mid-30s right now to be the leader. It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But shout out to LeBron. There was hold on, we're not going to pass the drama of. Did you see the Anthony Davis stuff?
Man, that was really strange. I did read one speculation on Twitter that he was sick, under the weather, which I think there's two ways you can go about that. One, he really was sick and that's why. But two, they went back and oh man, this does not look good. Let's just tell people he was sick because, the first thing that came up to me is when you were watching it live, they had LeBron mic'd up and there's that moment And I don't really see this talked about as much, but he's next to Anthony Davis on the bench. This is before he breaks the record. And he's like, "You're my brother, man." Or I think it was right after. It was right after he broke it. And he just looks over and he's like, "You're my brother, man. You know, that's all I want to say. That's all I want to say." And he's kind of smiling. And Davis is just like kind of looking at him and like doesn't smile or anything. And while I was watching it live, I was like, that was kind of a weird exchange. Like he didn't really say anything. I was like, maybe that's just how he is. And then you check Twitter later on and you see that like he's sitting down, showing no emotion when he hits the shot. It was really strange. Like I got some weird vibes from that. I don't know what was going on. Maybe he was just sick, or maybe he, you know, who knows? What's your thought?
I got a conspiracy theory.
Oh, you
Are
know,
you ready
I'm
for it?
always open to those.
So put your tinfoil hat on, Chance. I'm going to take you for a ride. Okay.
All right. Let's see what we got.
So there were reports that came out of that game that Darvin Ham and Russell Westbrook got into it at halftime.
Right.
I think Anthony Davis was involved in that whole situation. I think that Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook, they probably got into it over whatever it was. And then Russ, knowing that he was going to be headed out the door soon, I think that was one of those things where people really started to just speak their mind. You know exactly how you would start speaking your mind if you knew it was your last day of work and you don't have to see them co-workers no more. And I think, and I think that's what happened. And then LeBron, you know, being the GM that he is, he knows that Russ is getting traded. He knows all the details. And he's like, we getting off of him regardless. And he's like, I can't believe this is going on today on my night. You know what I mean? But he on cloud nine. He living it up. He can't wait to go drink some Lobos tequila. And he's like, I can't believe this happened. To him, he's just probably like, man, AD, I love you, bro. Like, you know you my guy. We gonna get this clown. We gonna get this clown up out of here. And then
just wait a couple of days. I got something up my sleeve for you.
Yeah, and then you hear the crazy stuff about that came out. I don't understand. I hate that this story got out there. With McMenamin had reported that that from the Lakers organization, someone has said that like we removed the cancer out the locker room, or we got rid of that vampire in the locker room, or whatever. And it was just a terrible quote to get out there. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like they are really throwing Russ's name out there on the way out the door, man. But it is what it is. The Lakers have moved on. We'll get into talking about the Lakers even some more. But before we talk about the Lakers, I want to talk to all of our listeners out there. Guys, we appreciate the feedback that you have been giving us. It's been great. We love hearing you guys' opinion and sending us stuff. Keep sending us stuff to include and talk about on the pod. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to be the most transparent and conversational and educational hoops podcast out there for you guys. We just want to make sure that we're having those conversations that you guys want to hear about, but then we're also doing all the legwork and watching 3, 4, 5 games a night on some nights, just so you don't have to. So keep giving us that feedback, because it's greatly appreciated. But what we also need you guys to do so we can grow our pod, we need you guys to like and leave us comments on each video. Even if it's the clip, if it's the full video, please interact with our YouTube page, because it'll help with growth. Now, Chance, on to the trade deadline. A lot of stuff happened. So the where I want to start with this, let's just kind of just have a conversation about. Let's start with the Nets and just let it trickle on down.
Yeah.
So
let's do it. Yeah, we don't really have a huge agenda for what teams we want to cover. I think we're just going to free flow and give our thoughts. I haven't really had a chance to talk to you much. Normally when this stuff is going down, we're texting throughout the day. I think we're both kind of in between, trying to at least be productive somewhat at work, but also be on Twitter all day. So I'm interested to see your thoughts on some of these moves and give my thoughts as well. So you want to start with the Nets? I think
man,
it's a good place to start.
Yeah, because the reason why I want to start with the Nets, because when you sit here and you think about the biggest moves that were made, it came out of the Nets organization. And then And we can sit here and say the stuff was surprising, but then we can also say it's really, for the past 3 years, everything has been nothing but drama
Yep.
in Brooklyn. When you saw everything play out, like, how surprised were you that we got to one day asking for Kyrie asking for requesting a trade, and then all of in less than a week to ending up trading not just Kyrie but also Kevin Durant? How surprised were you?
Honestly, man, with the way not only the league has gone, but with the way the Nets have been since this whole big three, regardless of who you change out for the third person is, regardless, since all of this started, there has just been so much unpredictable stuff happening that I really wasn't too surprised. Like when I got the notification middle of the week that Kyrie requested a trade, it's like for a second, like, oh wow, Kyrie requested a trade. But then you sit and you like comprehend that and you're like, yeah, it makes sense. It's Kyrie. Like, this happens every 6 months. Let's see if they actually trade him this time. And they did. And so from there, you get all the rumors about, everybody's like, oh, that means KD's going to be available. Or, some people are saying
Mm-hmm.
that they're not going to trade KD. They're going to build around him. And I think they could have gone either way. I think they could have kept KD and, tried to build around him. They've got some good assets around from the Kyrie trade, but I really like what the Nets did. I think at this point, you're like, look, we went all in for this. The experiment clearly didn't work. They won one
Mm-hmm.
playoff series, with that core that they had, which is just mind boggling. You could argue that they were a few inches away from a title, in that series against the Bucks. I think most people would agree that they were probably the best team in the league that year. And, Kevin Durant's foot was on the line, so they weren't able to get the win, but revisionist history is always there. So I like what they ended up doing as far as their pivot went. If you look at the full
Mm-hmm.
collection they got, so for Kyrie and KD, they got Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, who they flipped for 5 seconds, 5 first-round picks, and 2 other second-round picks. They got all of that for those two guys. I saw some people
Mm-hmm.
saying that the KD value was underwhelming. I thought that was a great haul for them personally. And so I think if you're
Yeah,
going to commit to the rebuild, I think they got great value. So those are my thoughts, in a long-winded
and
nutshell.
and and I agree with you too. So I actually had a friend. Shout out to my boy Rick Sisk. I had a friend send me like this TikTok today, and it was really interesting. And they were comparing the returns that the Nets had gotten for Harden and Kyrie versus what they got with Gobert, what the Utah Jazz got for trade and Rudy Gobert. And it was interesting because you sit here and look at it in a vacuum. Uh, Utah got Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverly, Walker Kessler. Well, the pick ended up being Walker Kessler,
Hmm.
Jared Vanderbilt, 23, 25, 26, 27, 29 first, right? They got 5 first out the deal. But then when the Nets, between the Nets and Harden and Kyrie's trades, they got back Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, a 22 pick, 27 pick, and a 29 first. Now, in a vacuum, it really does look like because the Gobert trade was a
Yeah, I
it,
mean, that
it,
was a
it, it
joke.
was it was it was a terrible trade then. It's a terrible trade now. So
Right.
so I don't want to compare those two, but I really think the Nets failure to trade these guys earlier is probably the problem. So like by the time they finally could move off of Harden, they were kind of put in a situation where it was like, all right, we either got to move them or we lose them for nothing. And it was the same situation with Kyrie. However, I do feel like they learned from their situation with Harden. I feel like this package
Hmm.
that they actually got from Dallas was probably the best package that was offered to them. When you sit there, I get it. Joe Tsai was being petty and didn't want to trade Kyrie to the Lakers. Uh, Completely understood it. But if you sit there and looked at what the Lakers were offering, what the Lakers are going to send you, Russell Westbrook, and then those two first round picks, I don't think that's worth it because you know that Russell Westbrook wasn't going to play for you, and then if you were
Hmm.
gonna move Russell, you were probably going to have to. send some more assets with him, or you were going to have to buy him out anyways, because
Right.
he wasn't going to play with KD. And then so you sit here and you look at the Kyrie trade. You see what people were talking about. OG Anunoby was going to go for, and what Mikal Bridges was going to go for. I look at someone like Dorian Finney-Smith. He's not necessarily to the caliber of those players, but he's probably just a notch right below. So if you tell me OG
Right.
Anunoby's worth 3 first-round picks, well, look, I better be getting 2 first-round picks for Dorian.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
That's the thing is like I think Bridges alone is worth another like 3 firsts. So when you look at the haul, that's like 7 firsts that they got basically when you combine them all together. Plus Cam Johnson could be worth another
yeah,
first. Like I was talking to some other
mhm,
friends about this earlier, and I think their equivalent was like 8 firsts for KD when you really like attach values next to the players plus the picks.
mhm,
Like that's a pretty big haul.
yeah. Well, and when you think about it, and then too, we start talking about and then like bringing Spencer Dinwiddie in. Spencer Dinwiddie is not Kyrie Irving to any degree, but he can give you 60% of what Kyrie's going to give you, and he's going to show up to work every single day. And then
No
like,
controversy.
and then now you move on to the KD trade. Uh, they got back 4 picks, and then they got back Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. Like, if you sit down and look at this Nets roster on paper, this Nets roster is not going to be terrible. They
Oh yeah,
might not
they'll
be
make the playoffs.
they might not they might not be a contender, but they're still going to be good, and that is important. You know why? Because they've
Because their pick
already
goes to
traded.
Houston, right? Yeah, their own
Exactly.
pick isn't even with them, so they need to at least make the playoffs either way. Like their pick
Yep.
situation's funny because they're in a situation where you don't necessarily need to lose because their picks
Hmm.
are all tied up in the Houston deal, but they have all these other picks from other teams, so they're kind of in that middling situation. But it's okay because they've accumulated so many firsts from other guys.
Yeah. And you say, look, the Nets have put themselves in a great position to capitalize off of, hey, it's another star that wants out, and we need to bring him in. They've got so many role players, and they're deep at the wings, which the
Hmm.
wing position is the most important position
They have so many
nowadays.
wings; it's crazy.
Yeah, bro, this place is wing you. This place got more wings than Wingstop. And so when you sit there and you look at their roster, man, they could always package a couple pieces, package them up with some picks, and they can go out and trade and make that trade in the summer if Toronto finally decides to say, look, let's blow it up. And then Toronto decides to make that move on Pascal Siakam. You bring him in, partner him up with Cam Thomas, who's been freaking balling.
Yeah, Mister 40 points a game, Cam
Yeah,
Thomas.
I'm like averaging 40 points a game this week, man. Like the Nets, shout out to the Brooklyn Nets because they actually turned a terrible situation into a good one. But Chance, I also do want to kind of talk about something I don't think anybody's talking about, honestly. Like
What's
we
that?
all know, we all know Kyrie Irving a uh, was a problem child for the Brooklyn Nets from the beginning. From we don't need a coach to the whole vaccine mandate situation, which the vaccine mandate was kind of stupid in New York, anyways. Not all the way his fault, but he's your best player. You need him to play, so he didn't
Right.
play. It was unfortunate. And then to sitting out games and boycotting and it's a long list of Kyrie Irving stuff. However, if you listen to the stuff that has been coming out about the Brooklyn Nets organization, I don't think that Josiah and Sean Marks, the GM, Sean Marks and Josiah, the owner, I don't necessarily think that they handled all of these situations the best. Um,
Hmm.
and and when you sit here and you look at it, you look at like I think that there's a lot of lessons that owners and GMs can learn from the Brooklyn Nets on. All right, hey, watch how you give control to players. Right, we're all about player empowerment, but you just can't give them full control. And then
Hmm.
also the second thing too is like when you start talking, like when you start putting, I get Kyrie hasn't been showing up to work and all these different things like that, but when you start hearing about you gonna put a championship clause in his contract, like that that doesn't really address the issue that you have with him. Now, games
Right.
played, different things like that, that makes sense. But then also too, the way Josiah handled the whole the anti-Semitic thing with Kyrie Irving, I thought that the Nets handled it terribly. And we talked about this on a previous pod, but Josiah being one of the first people to bring attention to this on Twitter with Kyrie Irving. And then obviously Kyrie just instantly shut down and started being a terrible, a
Mhm.
terrible customer for a PR agent, and just started, just digging his feet in the sand and handled that situation the worst I've probably seen any player handle any situation over the last decade.
If it
Um,
gets worse, I don't want to see it.
yeah, but when you sit there and you look at it, the Brooklyn Nets actually kind of were the ones that were really digging a fork in that situation instead of actually, handling it with Kyrie. And that situation could have been totally different if Josiah would have been like, instead of him being so frustrated by Kyrie from all the other things, and would have just said, "Hey,
Mhm.
let's handle this situation together and let's get through it because you're going to take a lot of flack for it, but we need to come up with ways that to express how you really feel." Because Kyrie has expressed how he's felt, and he put out a statement on the video, and there's no need to go back and backtrack that. But I really think that the Nets, the way they've handled all these situations, is a bad look because it also led to Kevin Durant, your big fish, wanting to leave town.
Yep.
And when you sit there and say, okay, they lost. Harden asked for a trade, Kyrie asked for a trade, and Kevin Durant asked for a trade. The big media conversation is always about these players. Like, what are these players doing wrong? These players have gotten too much control and they're doing all this stuff. But here's the truth: if three players ask for a trade from your organization, it might not just be them that's the problem.
I could see that. And you saw the quote where they asked Kyrie last night, about the Kevin Durant
Mhm.
trade, and he was like, "Oh, I'm just happy for him that he was able to get out of there." So it definitely seems like there was some friction going on. Definitely agree with the championship clause. I think that's absolutely nonsense. I don't see putting
Well,
that.
and I'm gonna stop you.
Go
I'm gonna
ahead.
stop you right there. And did you also hear Markieff Morris the other night? They asked Markieff
Yeah.
Morris. They said, "Hey, what did you feel about Kyrie's trade request?" He was like, "Honestly, I was just hoping I got traded with them." It was like
He
it
just
was
wants
a
some
lot.
playing time. He was riding the bench.
Yeah, but when his comments was like, it was a lot going on over there.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, it
you see what
was.
I'm saying? I think everybody was caught into it now. And granted, I'm not trying to excuse Kyrie Irving from any of that mess at all, because I think Kyrie Irving was probably the biggest problem with it. But there is the national media isn't talking enough about the Nets ownership in a lot of this failure.
Yeah, I think time will tell on this whole situation. I think if the Nets are able to get all these young pieces that are just good 3-and-D wings, like if they're able to build a good culture and make the playoffs and everybody's happy, I think then like, okay, it was probably, more so Kyrie. Or if things keep buckling down with the Nets and Kyrie goes to Dallas and it all works out, he gets an extension and things go well in Dallas, then you could say maybe it was a situation with Brooklyn. But on the other end, I could see where most of this was on Kyrie also, just because when you look at why Harden
Hmm.
demanded a trade, that was because he was fed up with Kyrie. He refused to get vaccinated. So they're playing down a superstar for the whole season or half the season for their home games. So I put that on mostly Kyrie also. And then with KD, I could see that going either way. It could be the management or it could just be like, hey, I signed up to play with all these stars. And now I'm sitting here with me and Ben Simmons, who we haven't talked about yet. And that is a big piece too. Ben
Yeah.
Simmons being nowhere close to what he was supposed to be is truly him, along with Kyrie being a complete maniac. That is what really derailed them, because if Ben Simmons is the Ben Simmons of old, this whole situation is different. You can trade Kyrie and still build around Ben Simmons and KD, but Ben Simmons being just a complete non-factor, he's a negative asset right now. That is the big part
Right,
of it.
man. Real quick, worst contract: Duncan Robinson or Ben Simmons?
I think it's still Ben Simmons. I mean, I saw
I
some
do
people
too.
earlier
I do
talking
too.
about, Duncan Robinson being somebody they wanted to go after. And I was like, Google his contract real quick and let me know if you still want him. But they're definitely both in the top 5. But yeah, I'm not sure which one. I think Simmons might be a little longer of a contract too. And at least Robinson will shoot the ball. So it's crazy.
Simmons, I think he has 3 years left, I believe. I believe it's 3 years left on his deal.
Yeah,
Or it might be 4 actually. You might be right. It might be longer than that, but
it's
yeah,
rough.
man.
It's rough.
So anyways, I think we can move on from the Nets. Let's talk about the two teams that ended up being the beneficiaries from the Nets. Chance. So let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks a little bit. We talked about them already on a previous pod. We don't have to talk about them much, but they finish up the trade deadline, and surprisingly, the Mavs didn't make any other moves. I saw that they were trying to get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. and Christian
Hmm.
Wood and package them up. They were I heard that they were actually on the 1 yard line with the Matisse Thybulle deal, but the Sixers were asking for the Mavs to send them a first as a part of the deal, and that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Nico Harrison shot that down. They've already sent a first and 2 seconds for what could be a rental player in Kyrie.
Right.
So I know the Mavs weren't going to send out another first for somebody who doesn't play offense at all in Matisse Thybulle. So
Right.
this team is definitely one of those teams I'm watching for the buyout market, because I think this team severely needs help in 3 different areas. They need probably a backup point guard that's a veteran, just because Jaden Hardy he's been playing great of late as a rookie, but can you really rely on him to be your backup point guard off the bench? And then also
Right.
you're losing Dorian Finney-Smith, which is one of your better 3-and-D guys. They need to backfill him, and then they also need a solid big, because you get in the playoffs and you get in a series and you got to play a Jokic, or you end up or playing an Anthony Davis. They need another big body rim protector that can handle some of the deficiencies that you're going to have by having a Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving backcourt. But
Right.
overall, how do you feel about the trade on the Maverick side of things?
So honestly, I think anybody that tells you they know exactly how this is going to be playing out is fooling themselves. I think there's different ways that this could go, and Kyrie is literally the most unpredictable player in the league. So I can sit here and tell you like, oh, this is a terrible idea. Kyrie is a nutcase, and this could completely backfire on them, and this is going to be awful. I could tell you that, but I could see it going so many different directions. I could see Kyrie going in there and things are great for 4 weeks, and then what do you know? Kyrie is Kyrie again. He just fully committed to the flat earth theory, and now he decided he's not going to fly by plane anymore, and he's going to walk to all the games and enjoy the flat earth, and he's late to every game now. Like, there's so many different things that could happen with this guy. But on the other end, he looked great. He looked like a guy in that game, last night, his first game. He looked like a guy that has been playing with them all season. Like, this guy is so
Mm-hmm.
talented that he can fit in and play so well with anybody if he can just, stick to on the court and stay committed to his team. So the ceiling is literally like getting to the championship. I still don't, well, actually, that was my thoughts yesterday with the Suns trade, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, shortly. I think their
Mm-hmm.
ceiling is Western Conference Finals based on some of the other moves that happened recently.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask me, like, I'm the GM of the Mavs, do I make this move? I would say definitely not, just because I think Kyrie is too much of a risk. I think that I'd rather see how it goes this year, get into the summer, you convey your pick to the Knicks. Now you've got an extra couple firsts that you can trade, and then you go all in on, more of a long-term fit. But when you look at it, like, yeah, he's an expiring, it could be a rental, but if he leaves, you get like what, $30 million in cap space, and
Yeah.
then you can make another move, or you can use that cap space to go get another guy. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like if it doesn't work, like they're completely tanked. They only gave up one first, like they have some, other options in their back pocket. So I don't think it's the worst move. I understand why you take that risk when you have a generational talent in Luka, and how often is a guy as talented as Kyrie going to be available. Like, I understand why you make the move. I wouldn't have done it personally, but I could see it going so many different directions, and I'm not going to act like I can predict what's going to happen next, because none of us can.
I'm gonna tell you, Chance, you probably would have made that move. You know why? Because
Why is
Luka
that?
Doncic wanted the move. So, so you,
And that's true. If Luca's in my ear telling me, "Hey, make this move," I'm like, "All right, let me do it as soon as I can. Let me pick up the phone." That's true.
hmm So I'm gonna give a couple quick takes on this, and then we can move on. My my from an X's and O standpoint, I've said this already. Kyrie Irving is the perfect backcourt mate for somebody like a Luka Doncic. Like I
Oh yeah.
am not worried about them not working out on the basketball court. If you sat there, if you watched that game against the Clippers the other day, Kyrie Irving, the stuff that he was doing is exactly what this Mavericks offense needed. Like
Oh
he
yeah.
added a jolt to this offense just because the Mavs, outside of Josh Green, the Mavs really don't have much. They don't really get much off ball movement. And that's been a big issue for the Mavs. Like obviously, Luka Doncic is a great scorer, but Luka Doncic is not an off ball scorer. He doesn't do anything off ball. For how good
Hmm.
he is, that's one of his weaknesses on offense. Um,
Right.
but whenever you sit there and you look at Kyrie, believe it or not, in that one game, Kyrie showed great leadership. It was times where he was because he was out there with a whole bunch of young guys, just due to the Mavs not having a whole bunch of people on the roster at that time, and because of the trade and all that stuff, right? And he's out there playing with Jaden Hardy and Josh Green for big minutes, and you could just see him and Theo Pinson. You could see him telling them, "No, you take the ball. This is
Hmm.
I'm not going to play the same way that Luka plays." He was telling them like, "Yo, you hold the
Right.
ball. Let me get this off ball action. I'm gonna come back and get it." Like, and that was so refreshing to see, because then you really saw how that offense just really opened up to a whole different level whenever Luka's not on the court. Because if you sit there and
Yep.
look at Luka's on and off, that's the Mavs' biggest hole. When you start talking about when Luka goes and sits down, everything goes down into the tank. and, so,
Yeah,
and
the
so now
Mavericks were
being
1-7. They were 1-7 without Luca going into last night's game. I think they started 0-7, then they won their last game. And the
mm-hmm,
Mavericks, there is no way they beat a Clippers team with Kawhi and Paul George without Luca. If you don't have a guy
yeah,
like Kyrie, like he's a difference maker for that reason too. Luca's going to miss games, and now you've got somebody else
mm-hmm.
that when Luca's out, he can command the floor and still get you wins to where you're not having to rely on Luca every single night. That's a big deal.
And Luca was so happy. It was the happiest I've ever seen Luca in a in
Yeah.
in since Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, man. Like like he after the game, he was reposting Kyrie's stat line and and was cheesing the whole game and talking crap from the bench to the Clippers like he always does. And man,
Yep.
and Luca was pumped because Luca has never played with a teammate that can go get his own bucket, that he doesn't have to go get touches like we had Porzingis for a while, and
Hmm.
and Porzingis, even though Porzingis is a great basketball player, at the end of the day Porzingis would cry about getting touches and
Right.
not being
He
able
wanted to
to
post
do
up.
all these things, but he couldn't create his own shot. Now
Right.
Luka has somebody that he can just zip the ball to and then go get it, and he knows he's going to get more open shots. So from an X's
Hmm.
and O's standpoint, not worried about it. This is the piece that I'm closely keeping an eye on with the whole Kyrie situation. So in the event that Kyrie is here for a rental situation, what do you do next? Right? You leave yourself open to a lot. And like, man, this is a ballsy move by Nico. But at the end of the day,
Yep.
I mean, you really don't have too many other great options, you know. And
Yeah.
if you're gonna try to win with Luca on this contract, you got to go out and go get someone like a Kyrie. And so from that standpoint, I get it. Like I've been hearing on the national, and and I got a whole bone to pick with a lot of this national coverage lately. Uh, so my first thing with national coverage is obviously I get you're skewed to certain markets. Completely get it.
Mm-hmm.
But in particular with this Kyrie Irving trade, don't sit there and say, "Oh well, Kyrie, he really wanted to go to LA, he really wanted to go to Phoenix." And don't be surprised if he still gets there this summer and all this type of stuff. But then and then say like, I don't, and then double down and say, well, I don't know how he's going to fit with Luca, and I don't know how that's going to go. But then at the same time, you're like, oh, well, he can go play with LeBron. It's going to work out. Oh,
Right.
he can go in there and play with KD and Devin Booker and Ayton on the team, and it's going to work out. Like,
Right.
it is so crazy to me. I really wish that like a lot of this national coverage that people were getting. This is why I'm glad we started a podcast, because people don't sit down and think about all of the everything else that actually is regarding basketball with these decisions. And you got to sit there and think Kyrie Irving wants to get paid. Why did his situation blow up with the Nets most recently? Was because he wanted to get paid. Who can
Yep.
pay him the most? It's the Dallas Mavericks. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm sure Kyrie, if that's his biggest objective, which that's the thing, we don't know. It's Kyrie Irving. We don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
So stop sitting here acting like you know about his situation with Phoenix and LA, because you don't know that either. You don't know that just as much
Right.
as you don't know about his situation in Dallas. You didn't know about it when he was in Brooklyn, like you didn't know about it when he was in Boston,
Yep.
and like you didn't know about it his last years in Cleveland. So that is so frustrating. And my last second rant too is, look, man, I get it with these Memphis Grizzlies. But some of the stuff I have been seeing about the coverage over this Ja Morant stuff has been so frustrating to me. Because
Oh yeah.
here's the truth of the matter. Has Ja Morant been making some mistakes? Hell
Oh,
yeah, he has.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I'm not going to deny that. However, like some of this stuff, like where we sit there and I see this cycle, and I've been keeping up with it. Where these young players, where we build them up, and then all of a sudden we want to start tearing them down. You saw with Trey and Luca are my most recent examples. Trey and Luca, their rookie years, they were hyping them up, and then their second years, they were like, "Oh my gosh, these two guys have been dominant on their teams. They brought the Hawks and the Mavericks from irrelevancy to being in the playoffs and all this type of stuff." And then the next years after that was Trey Young is a cancer in his locker room, don't play defense, and then Luka Doncic is out of shape, and he doesn't take the game serious. I see the same cycle with Ja Morant. My issue with these I get it that you guys got to talk about stuff every single day, but what you need to start keeping the main thing, and stop always doing this same thing of like build somebody up and then start attacking their character, because that is just not right. Now, what the conversation should be about the Grizzlies is, yes, y'all need to be worried about basketball instead of worrying about running your mouths all the time. That should be a piece of the conversation. Yes, does Ja Morant probably need to change the way he moves off the court? Yeah, he probably does. But keep the conversation about that instead of trying to make the conversation about his family and everything else that has become.
His
And that
upbringing. Yeah.
and his upbringing and all that stuff. All that stuff, it doesn't matter for the conversations that we're having about basketball. And that is why people get so tired of these the ESPNs and all these and some of these other organizations, just because it becomes so much about all this stuff that is irrelevant to what actually matters. And
Yep.
it goes back to like my situation with Kyrie. The same thing, man. And so I'm done with that rant. We can get back to the trade deadline. But
I agree 100%.
I had to get that off my chest. Now, look, so we're done talking about the Mavericks. Let's talk about the Phoenix Suns.
How did we get through 44 minutes without talking about the Phoenix Suns is what I want to know. This is
it's been
I
a
don't even know.
long week, man.
It's been such a crazy day. And like I'm looking back, I'm like, man, there's been so much that happened. The Phoenix Suns just traded for Kevin Durant, and it took us so long to even get to that because this has been such a crazy week. But man, like the Suns are so they went. I was watching Rob Perez Worldwide Web. I was watching his stream last night when the news broke, and it was so funny because his instant thought was, I have to go bet on the Suns to win the championship because they were like plus 1,600 at the time, and he instantly got it in. And they immediately after the trade, they went down to like plus 500. Like that is just how much of a difference KD makes. And so when I saw this, yeah, like the Suns, obviously they were, in talks of going for KD over the offseason, and that never ended up happening. They decided to work things out, but they were always just waiting for that moment. And I do think that they had the best package to offer. And it's a deal that I really love for both sides. We've already talked about the Nets piece of it. I love the value that they got, but that's not to say that I think it was an overpay by any means. I think it was fair value for KD. And now you got a core of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Ayton, who I've not been very impressed with this season, but maybe he'll be a little bit more motivated now that he's on a legit title contender. We'll see if they can restore that friction with Monty. And Chris Paul hasn't looked good on offense, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. Like Chris Paul can just be that 38-year-old point guard that facilitates the offense, and he can average 8 points a game, 12 assists, and that's all they really need. When you've got Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on the wings, like as long as they stay healthy, that is a huge caveat because we know Chris Paul's injury history, especially in the playoffs. We know Devin Booker has had some playoff history and as well of getting hurt. He's got a lot of soft tissue issues that he's been working through over the past couple of years. And we know KD's injury history that he's, out right now, and that could always happen. It could very easily be in a situation where we get to the playoffs and Booker goes down, KD goes down. Like that could happen. I won't act like it won't. But man, if this team stays healthy, that is going to be a tough out in the wide West that there is right now. There are so many teams that could win the West, but the Suns, in my opinion, they're the top favorites as of now. Do you agree with that? You think this move puts them to the top?
Yeah, I don't think it's really an argument. I think you got to put them at the top. But there is an argument. There is a case for Denver just because.
Oh yeah.
You sit here and you look at it. There's only we've got like 20, 30 games left in the season. Right. And when you sit there and look at it, so Denver has been playing together all year. They got more continuity. When you start moving in when you move in big pieces like a Kevin Durant into your offense, yeah, it's going to take probably a little minute to just make sure that, to get everything right. Like in these ATOs, like who's getting the ball and like these at the end of game situation. How are we gonna handle things like that? And Kevin Durant, we don't necessarily know how he's going to come back from injury, how long that's going to take. So there's a lot of questions around it. But for a new owner to have a team and then basically make a trade for Kevin Durant in the same week, dude, that's got to be some all-time legendary ball stuff, man.
Oh yeah, that is. And it's crazy. I'm sitting here looking back on like the recent champions of the last 10 to 15, 20 years. Like, has there been a team that won a championship that made a move for a superstar like this during the season? Obviously, you had the Raptors who got Kawhi, but that was over the summer.
Didn't Rasheed Wallace? The Pistons traded for Rasheed and they won, right?
Yeah, so that was what, like early 2000s, like around 2004, 2005. So it's been nearly 20 years since we've seen a team. And even Rasheed, like he's not on that superstar level, like he was a great piece for them and was a huge part of what they did. They had that, core collective group with no single superstar, but I can't think of a time when a team traded for a superstar midseason and won a championship. Not to say it can't happen. It just goes to show how big of a trade this is because superstars rarely get traded in the first place, let alone like at the deadline midseason like this. So it's huge. And it really set off the fireworks that came behind, which would end up being a really active and, good trade deadline. I was getting a little nervous that it would be a little dud, but that really set off I guess Kyrie kind of really set it off, but KD coming behind. And yeah, I'm excited to see how the West shakes out with the Suns. I agree the Nuggets are definitely up there as well. I'm still not counting out Golden State. I still think they'll be in it. The Grizzlies, they got, the minor move in Kennard. They got another shooter, but they didn't make that big OG splash that, people were wanting to see. So I don't think they got a little better, but I don't know if you call them a front runner by any means.
Well,
So, but who
let's
knows?
well let's move on to Memphis. Let's talk about them for a second. So you mentioned Luke Kennard.
Yep.
They brought him in. What was that final trade? What did they end up being?
So we gave up a couple second round picks. It was a 3-team deal. So it was the Clippers
Mm,
and Rockets, and it originally came out that they were sending the Rockets were sending Eric Gordon to the Clippers, and then the Grizzlies got involved on a 3-team deal to end up getting Eric Gordon. So the Clippers got Eric Gordon and 3 second round picks from the Grizzlies. Grizzlies got Luke Kennard, and the Rockets got John Wall, Danny Green, and a potential pick swap. So basically, the way that works, the Rockets own the Bucks pick this year, so they can swap that with the Clippers pick. So that could end up like jumping them up like 8 to 10
mm-hmm.
spots or so. But the core of that is the Grizzlies gave up
Yeah.
3 seconds and got Luke Kennard, who
Yeah,
I think
that's
is a great
solid.
fit. He's a 45% 3-point shooter over the last 2 years. He wasn't getting a lot of minutes in LA, partly because they have such a huge accumulation of wing depth that he just didn't really have a spot. It was kind of a weird situation over there. But I think when you look at the Grizzlies, they needed 2 things. They needed more depth and somebody that could shoot. And Luke Kennard fits both of those. He can come off the bench and spot up when Ja's out there, and he's going to get so many open looks. I can't wait to see how he looks on our second
Mm-hmm.
unit. So I think it's a great move. I was, on team like go all in for OG or even Mikal Bridges when it looked like he might be available after the Nets trade, but it seemed like they weren't really interested in making another move. So I think the fact that OG didn't get traded, a lot of Grizzlies fans were upset because they wanted a guy like that, but he didn't get traded at all. So that tells me that the asking price was probably outrageous. So I'm okay
Yeah.
with the fact that at least we did something to get better. So happy with
Well,
the move, and we can always reevaluate.
I did see chance that the Grizz, well, that Woj on the Woj pod had said that the Nets they received an offer of 4 picks for Bridges. He didn't disclose that team, but he did mention the Grizzlies right afterwards. Wink, wink. So I'm assuming it was probably the
Huh.
Grizz that offered
If we
4
offered 4
picks.
first and they said no, then everything you said about Brooklyn's incompetence is right. If you get 4 first, you have to take them, man. That's absolutely
Man,
insane. And I had Grizzlies fans that I know that were down to offer 4 first. I was more on the camp of try to offer 3 first, maybe as a young guy like Zaire to throw in there too. But I got to a point where if I got a notification that the Grizzlies just traded 4 first from Mikal Bridges, I would not be upset, which sounds crazy because he's an advanced role player, but that's the market that we live in now. And, the Grizzlies weren't going to trade for another star. You don't need another
right.
star when you have Ja, Jaren, and Bane already. You needed a really good role player that fits the system. I thought OG was the perfect guy to fit that system. Once Bridges became available, I think he is even more perfect to fit the system because he's a better shooter, better offensive creator, maybe not the best perimeter defender in the league, not as versatile as OG on defense, but still a very good defender in his own right. I think he would have been the perfect fit, but at the end of the day, if he's not available, he's not available. I'm not going to be upset that we didn't throw a 5th first-round pick if that were the case. Like, if the guy, if they're asking for something outrageous, that's fine. So the fact that they didn't get moved elsewhere, if you would have told me that the Warriors went and got OG for 2 future firsts or 3 future firsts, I'd be upset because I'd be like, we could have done that offer and, we could have gotten him. But the fact they didn't get moved, I think they did the best they could, and we'll see what happens from here from a Grizzlies perspective.
Like if the Grizz offered 4 picks, it's an overpay for sure. However,
Yeah.
I think the Grizz are in a situation to where they can overpay for a guy because Zach Kleiman has not traded any picks, traded any first round picks in his time taking over the front office with the Grizzlies. So I think the Grizzlies have like 11 picks to play with, 11 first rounders or something like that or whatever.
So it's 5 first rounders. So we've got the 23, 25, 27, and 29. And then we also have the Golden State 2024. So with the, every other year rule, we had 5 first rounders. Plus we have basically our second, or we did until we unloaded them off for Kennard, but we had our second every year or somebody's second every year as well. So I think we might have had around 11 total picks, 5 first rounders. So you easily could have, and you could have thrown some light protections on those picks too and extended it out some to, cover yourself a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't have been upset if we traded 4 first, but I'm not upset that we didn't either. I think we did what we had to do. And you have to remember a lot of these guys, like it's going to be a crazy summer also. It's not a
Mhm.
huge free agency class when you look at who's coming up. It's not a lot of
Yep.
stars. So if teams are wanting to make a move, it's going to be with trades as well. So just because guys like OG, Siakam, Mikal Bridges, John Collins, all these guys, which we say John Collins every 6 months and that never happens. So I might as well take his name off of it. But all these guys could be
He'll still
available
be there.
again. Yeah, he'll still be in Atlanta. They might as well just hang his jersey at this point. But these guys are going to be potentially available depending on how the rest of the season shakes out. So I don't think it's a situation where it's not like the move is gone forever. Like the Suns, they didn't get KD before the season, but everything came back around. The situation changed and they were able to make that all in move. So we still have all of our first round picks. We still have future assets. I think it's going to be okay. Whether, might not make a big splash this year, but the team is still young. They still have a bright future and you can reevaluate in the summer and make your big move then if need be.
Yeah, because you can look at how active this trade deadline became. I think all of this is a precursor for the summer. Because man, you sit there and you look at the summer. It's not a whole bunch of names on the as far as players that are going to become free agents this summer. So that means there's going to be a lot of moves getting made for people for teams to get better. I'm actually on the camp of I think the Grizzlies made a great move. Get what you can. They traded some seconds, just like it seems like everybody else in the league today was just trading seconds. Seconds were just getting thrown around everywhere. You get a
seconds
second.
going
You
everywhere.
get a second.
That was wild.
and so, but getting Luke Kennard, the Grizzlies have needed shooting depth. I would have liked for them to find a way to keep somebody like a Danny Green on that roster, just because I do believe this Grizzlies team does need some veteran presence in that locker room. Luke Kennard has been around a while, but Danny Green seemed like he was a good vet. But I do feel like this team does just need some guidance. But then I don't know. A lot of this stuff has been happening while Danny Green has been on the team too. So
I was thinking that too. I think he seemed like he was very professional by all accounts in his time with us, and would I've liked to keep him around for that? Yes, but also to make salaries match, like it was him or one of our core players. And as much as I like Danny Green, I think it was really unreasonable for Grizzlies fans to expect him to be a major contributor, because it wasn't just like a simple ACL tear. Like that guy's knee was tore up in so many different places, and he had some major surgeries done at age 34. It was really unrealistic to expect him to be like a major contributor for us this year. And we needed somebody that could be more than just a veteran presence, somebody that could be a major contributor. So I understand the move of getting off him for that reason. And so, yeah, I mean, Kennard is a veteran presence in a way, but I don't see him being a guy that's kind of commanding the locker room and reeling Ja in. If Danny Green couldn't do it, I don't think Luke Kennard can do it, but maybe Luke Kennard can insert himself in some rap videos and be a new player now. So we'll see.
All right. So let's stay in the West, and then we can come back to the East. Chance, a team, or actually, a city that I thought did really well in this trade deadline was the city of Los Angeles.
I was gonna say my guess would be LA, since you said city, and I agree.
Yeah, man. I think between what the Clippers and Lakers did this whole season for this trade deadline, like we'll start with the Lakers. The Lakers, they gave up Russell Westbrook, and then they Pat Bev, Thomas Bryant, and Kendrick Nunn, and one first round draft pick and some seconds, and they got back D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Mo Bamba, Devon Reed, and Rui Hachimura. When you sit there and you look at that, like the problem with the Lakers roster was like you had all these G Leaguers playing extended roles. Now you basically go out and get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 legit rotation players between.
Yep.
Man, I don't know what's going on out there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to soundproof my room. But but you go out and you go get a D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Mo Bamba, and then Rui Hachimura. All 5 of those guys are going to play playoff minutes.
Yeah, I agree. I think D'Angelo, we'll see. As far as on the defensive end, I think that's always a question mark with him. But offensively, he is such a huge upgrade over what they had before, and I think he could be a great fit returning to LA, the team that drafted him originally. I think the sneaky big value out of this is Jared Vanderbilt. Huge fan of his game. I think he's a guy that could be that perfect match next to Anthony Davis, another defender. I think the front court defensive line of LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Vanderbilt is sneaky, really, really good, which could make up for some of the deficiencies that D'Angelo Russell will bring on the point of attack at the guard position. So I like the value. I think when you look at what they gave up, this is about as good as it could get for them. I'd be pretty happy if I was a Lakers fan. I still don't think they're good enough to be a contender, but they've got more pieces to build around. You only give up one first round pick, which is huge because now you can get into the summer, convey another one of those picks over to New Orleans, and now you've got some more room to play with. Now you've got a potential another first round pick that you can use for another trade bargain. As we mentioned, this summer could be crazy with another round of moves. So they might not be contenders this year, but I think they're building up that foundation to where they've got the pieces to where they're not going to be that team rolling out a bunch of G leaguers like you mentioned before. I think they're building a strong roster, and you never know if you get that Anthony Davis back that you had earlier in the season along with this roster, then you might talk that they might could do some serious damage. So I like the moves. I think for what they had to play with, I think they did just fine.
All right, and then the Clippers. How do you feel they ended the day? So they went and got Bones Highland from Denver, Eric Gordon, and Mason Plumlee, and all they lost was Luke Kennard basically out of their rotation, which Ty Lue was kind of shaky with his minutes anyways. But in Mason Plumlee, they got a backup big, and then Eric Gordon comes back. You get another shooter off the bench, or I don't know how they're going to play him. And then Bones Highland, you got a young stud. And they didn't give up Terrence Mann. That was a big piece of the conversation. Was Terrence Mann going to go or not? But they were able to keep him. I think the only major piece for them that they need now is probably just go out and go get you a legit starting point guard, right? Or
Russell Westbrook. That's the name. That's the name that's on the buyout market. So we'll see. It looks like they might be going after Russ, which, I mean, we'll see how that works out if that is the case. But I do overall like their deadline. I think Bones Highland has a lot of talent. They definitely, if you've been paying attention to Denver the last 2 weeks, he's basically been out of the rotation and he's had a lot of friction. I'm not sure if there's some rumblings that he wanted a bigger role or just didn't really get along with Coach Malone over there. So not really sure what stirred all of this, but him getting traded was like the least shocking thing of the day because we all pretty much saw that coming. But I think he's a talented guy that could run on that second unit with a guy like Eric Gordon. They've got some good depth now, guys that could fill in and start during the inevitable times when guys like Kawhi and Paul George are missing games, which we know will continue to happen. So I like the move. Mason Plumlee is another good backup big. I think he was a good asset to bring in as well. They'll be active in the buyout market. So I think they're another team to just compete in the West. I don't think they did anything that makes me think otherwise.
All right, then as far as teams in the West, let me try to see. You want to talk about the Warriors?
Yeah, I think the Warriors, they unloaded from Wiseman. They basically just played hot potato with 5 second-round picks all afternoon, and so I guess the trade was they gave up Wiseman, then they got Bay, but then they gave up Bay for 5 seconds, but then they went and used those 5 seconds to go get Gary Payton back, which is a great move in my opinion. They really needed another wing defender. He was so valuable for them, and it ended up being a complete win-win for everybody. Gary Payton left, he went and got his bag, and now he can come back to Golden State. So I like the move for them too. I mentioned it before. I still think they're a contender. I've thought all year basically that as long as Steph is healthy, which is a big caveat because he's got his injury that he's rehabbing right now, and there's still not a ton of clarity. We did get an update in the midst of the trade deadline fiasco that
I missed
going
it.
To be. It wasn't much, just that their PR put out that he'll be reevaluated after the All-Star break. So there's really still no exact timeline, just that they're continuing to evaluate him and his knee. So that's the big caveat. That's his second injury of the season. And, they obviously really, really need him to be healthy to have a chance at anything. But if he is, then I like the core that they've got, and I think they could have a chance too. I really, really like the Gary Payton move coming back. I think that makes a lot of sense for them.
Man, I think it's great, man, because like the Wiseman fit wasn't going to work, and just based off of the Warriors' play style and the Warriors' timeline, I'm not ruling out hope in James Wiseman. I think that he still has the
Right.
opportunity to go on and do great things. But I think putting James Wiseman landed in Detroit with a young basketball team, I think that's a perfect fit for him.
Oh yeah, I've said from the beginning, James Wiseman is a Memphis guy. We try to keep tabs on how he's doing, and Golden State was just a terrible fit for him all around. Once we realized that he was so far away from being ready, and that he needs to go to a team that, for one, he needs to go to a team that he can make mistakes. He was just completely lost, particularly on the defensive side of the game. Like, he was just always a step too late, never in the right spot on rotations, and when you're in that position, you can't play for the Warriors. The Warriors are a team that is so pinpoint. They're so well coached on both sides of the ball with the way they play offense. You have to be moving. You have to know how to move without the ball, how to set screens, how to make passes out of the post. Basically what Kevon Looney, who I think is one of the more underrated players in the league, but the things that he can do, Wiseman, that's just not his game. And he needed to go to a place like Detroit where he can play 20 to 30 minutes a night, mess up a lot throughout the game, and learn from that. And so now they've got the Memphis big men of Jalen Durant and James Wiseman, who both have a lot of potential. Durant's been pretty solid so far in his rookie year. So definitely going to be keeping tabs on Detroit a lot. And I really like the young assets they've built. I think that's a perfect spot for Wiseman. And I think it makes a lot of sense to let him develop there. And on the Golden State side, they basically traded James Wiseman for Gary Payton back. And I think that makes a lot of sense for them too, as I've said. So I like it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. All right. Do you got any other teams you want to talk about in the West? Or are you good?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everybody. Denver, relatively quiet. They made the one move. We covered the Grizzlies, the Mavs, Suns, Clippers. The Pelicans were fairly quiet. I thought they might, be in the market for OG, and that ended up fizzling out. So
they made a solid move
getting
getting Josh Richardson, though. I actually like that move for them.
Yeah.
You go out and get
that is another rotation shooter they could get.
Yeah. Get you another 3-and-D wing. I like that, especially with the way, because they use Herb Jones a lot there. Maybe he can kind of reduce some of his usage.
Yep. The Blazers, they were fairly active. They got Matisse Thybulle, another wing defender, add a little more size, and they flipped Josh Hart to get a first-round pick, and they got Cam Reddish, who has not been able to stick around anywhere yet, but the talent is still there. Maybe they can, maybe Chauncey Billups can get that out of him. So, nothing that's changing their trajectory by any means, but I think a couple solid moves for the Blazers. But besides that, I think that pretty much covers what we saw out West.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the East, Chance. So Atlanta did not move John Collins. John Collins is still there. We talked about that. Were you
can record that clip and play it again next trade deadline, and it's going to be the exact same, apparently.
Were you surprised that Atlanta didn't make any big moves?
I was a little surprised. I thought this might be the year it finally happens, but you did hear some rumblings going into the day that they were a little more quiet and a little more hesitant on moving John Collins. I think there's a low-key situation going on with his finger where his finger is completely messed up. And have you seen like his shooting percentage this year? He's like 20-something% from three. So you remember like over the offseason, I don't know if you saw this, but he had like a major finger injury where his finger was like the size of a baseball. And this season, his perimeter shooting is completely fallen off a cliff. And I think that is actually a bigger deal than people are realizing. So I think that could be part of it, is he just has no value anymore. So yeah, not too surprised. We'll see what they do in the offseason, if that's finally the time. But it just seems like this is going to be a thing that we do every year, is just talk about how John Collins didn't get traded once again.
Yeah. And then another team, while we're talking about teams that didn't make moves, I was so shocked that the Chicago Bulls did nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I saw a tweet.
Which way you want to go?
Yeah, they were like right there in the middle. So I saw a tweet before that there were like three teams that didn't make a move at all. It was the Bulls, Cavs, and I think the Wizards maybe. And I think all three of them should have been very active. I think starting with the Bulls for sure, at least get a first for Alex Caruso. Like, what are you doing with him when you're trying to decide how to move forward for the future? Like, go ahead and like, Caruso is a very valuable player. And I think any 29 teams in the league would give you a first round pick for him.
Yeah.
Levine, there were some rumors towards the end around like that last hour and a half that they were shopping him, but nothing came of that as well. I've been team blow it up on the Bulls for a while. I'm shocked that they didn't make a move. I thought that this was a time for them to cash in, especially with the lack of sellers that there seem to be going in. I thought this could have been an opportunity for them to really get a nice haul. And I mean, you saw with some of these moves, like first round picks and especially second round picks, people were throwing them around like it was nothing. You could have got a lot of good return from some of these guys, and the fact that they were quiet was pretty stunning.
And did you see like the Knicks were highly engaged on Zach LaVine? That was an interesting nugget that was
That would have
out
been a good
there.
move. And yeah, they could have got some capital because the Knicks, they've got some of their picks. They've got that pick from you guys in Dallas as well. So they had some offerings to throw at them. And I'm really surprised that they stood pat and did nothing. I guess they'll go all in
Mhm.
for that 10 seed and get them a play-in game.
Man, I don't know. So let me see. So who else in the East? Toronto. We we had talked about for weeks that Toronto was going to make all these moves. Everybody was
Yep.
shopping all their players, but then Toronto said, "No, we're going to go get our big man back." Which this trade was crazy because I don't know how many players went back to their old teams.
Yeah.
Like,
D'Angelo, Jakob
yeah,
Pertl, a few others too. Yeah.
as
And
a
so that happened last night, and that kind of set the tone because that comes through and you're like, okay, this could be one of two things. That either means they're looking to buy, which would be kind of interesting, or maybe the consensus was like, yeah, they still wanted Pirtle regardless. Like they just want a true center for the future, regardless of their other moves. So I thought they'd still be in the market to shop. You know, you had so many names. OG was the big one. That was the one you heard the most of, but Siakam was a low key guy they were talking about as well. But also Gary Trent Jr., Fred Van Fleet, a lot of different guys that were basically the past 2 weeks, they were in the rumor mill that they were shopping all of these guys. And for them to basically hold all of them, it just shows that Masai is not going to make a move unless he's absolutely dominating and completely winning. And so I guess his asking price for all these guys was too high for anyone to pay because I was shocked that they didn't do anything at all.
I honestly think Masai was like, I'm gonna wait till this summer
It could
to
be it.
to make these moves because you sit here and you look at teams like I could see them making a trade with the Nets if the Nets are like, hey, look, we need to cut down some of these wings and
Mm-hmm.
we'll package them up in some of these picks and y'all give us Siakam. And then that way you can put some of these young guys around Scotty Barnes for the future. Maybe you go out and go get a Mikal Bridges and then some of those draft picks, and you put around
Yep.
Scotty Barnes, and so that's I don't think that this story is fully written for the Toronto Raptors about like this is a team and we're gonna stick with it. I really think it's like, hey, let's get through the year. We're gonna
Right.
reassess where we at, but this summer it's gonna be the time to make these moves. If we still ain't doing nothing this year.
Yep. I can see that.
Another team, Miami. I was shocked that Miami didn't really make
Well, Pat
any
Riley fell asleep. They were going to, but he was snoozing on the clock.
that story was kind of crazy. In case you are listening out there, I don't know how true the story is or not, but apparently, um, the Heat had a trade dialed up to seeing what Kyle Lowry to the Clippers. Is
Yeah,
that it? Was it?
it was Kyle Lowry to somewhere. I think it might have been LA. Yeah, the Clippers, I believe is what it
Yeah,
was.
to send Kyle Lowry to the Clippers, but then allegedly his team was calling him, but then he didn't answer
He
the
was
phone.
resting.
Yeah, because he
He
was
was
resting,
resting.
and so I think his old age might be catching up with him. But that was an interesting story hearing that from his perspective. The 76ers, they what they got? What Jalen McDaniels, right?
Yeah, they
Um,
flipped basically Matisse Thybulle and got
mm,
McDaniels, which I think is a good move. I think McDaniels is a superior player on offense. Might not have as
mhm.
much versatility on defense, but still a great defender and a more expansive offensive game. So I like that. Cleveland was the one team for me that I was pretty shocked stood pat. I think it's been a story all season that they needed that other wing next to
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell, and they've messed around with the Okoro, Dean Wade, all these random guys. But I really thought that they could be in the market for another wing, especially like some of those wings that the Nets had. I could have seen them going after a Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, like just like a
Mhm.
solid wing 3-and-D guy. And I'm really shocked that I didn't even hear them in rumors or anything. It seems like they were pretty quiet. And
Yeah.
I know they gave up all their assets for Mitchell, but I would have expected them to at least make some type of minor move to at least get another wing to shore up that lineup. But We'll
Well,
see.
one trade I had heard of probably a couple weeks ago that Cleveland wanted, but then the Mavericks weren't ready to do it. But then by the time the Mavericks were ready to do it, Cleveland was like, it was Tim Hardaway Jr. for Karis LeVert,
Yep.
which I honestly agree with Cleveland by standing pat with Karis LeVert and just letting his contract roll out, because with Tim Hardaway Jr., you're gonna get a streaky shooter. And you
Yep.
got 3 years left on what, 19 mil a year or something like that. So I think they did the right thing by not doing that trade. That was the only time I heard about them wanting to do anything.
Yeah, they were pretty quiet today.
All right, man. Well, I think we pretty much hit a lot of teams. Was there
I think
anything else that stood out to you that we didn't cover?
we pretty much covered everybody worth covering. Boston made the minor move. They got Muscala as a backup big. I think that, doesn't move the needle a whole lot, but helps them shore up some depth. I thought that was a good move. But yeah, I think the overall biggest takeaways is Phoenix is a clear contender in the wide West that's open right now. That move is really what shook everything up. Really shocked about Toronto. Those are my two biggest, surprises going in, is that Phoenix was able to get the all-in move. If you're a Suns fan, you're ecstatic at how today went and yesterday went. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Curious to see how the rest of the season goes. And I think, like you said, in the summer, I could see things getting very explosive again. So excited for the madness part 2.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all for listening to this special episode of the Trade Deadline. Until next time, I'm used to saying until next week, but damn, at this point, we're recording pods
Never know
every
when
other
we're
day.
recording anymore.
So until next time, we'll holler at you. Peace.
Oh, yeah.